This is your host, Jasper Gallows, welcoming you to another episode of Ghoulish Diversions. MediEvil is by far the game series that has impacted me the most. It was developed by the now defunct SCE Studio Cambridge, which interestingly enough dissolved on my birthday in 2017. But I digress. The first game in the series, simply titled MediEvil, was released on the PlayStation 1 in Europe on October 9th, 1998, and in North America on October 20th, 1998. Now, I didn't own the game for quite some time after its release, but when I first played it, I was immediately captivated. I was enraptured in a world full of gothic, whimsical charm, not unlike that found from the mind of Tim Burton. The music that accompanies this game is hauntingly beautiful, and the opening for the stage, The Haunted Ruins, continues to give me chills to this day. The soundtrack was composed by Paul Arnold, aka Bob, and Andrew Barnabas, aka Barn, professionally known as Bob and Barn, an absolutely genius duo that received a BAFTA, which is the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, nomination in 2004 for the score of the game Primal. The gameplay is consistent throughout the entire series and is considered by most as a hack and slash with hints of action, adventure, and puzzle solving. One of my favorite elements of the game was the Chalice of Souls. Now, after you slay an enemy, their soul will then travel to the chalice, and it shows a percentage of which it is filled. Once you completely fill the chalice, Sir Daniel Fortescue, the game's protagonist, can obtain it after he locates it. In earlier stages of the game, the chalices are easier to fill and to obtain, but they become more difficult as the story progresses. In certain levels, the percentage can actually decrease if you accidentally kill an innocent, and then their soul travels to the chalice. Each chalice grants Sir Fortescue the opportunity to visit the Hall of Heroes. There are fully realized statues of 9 other heroes, and they offer Daniel new weapons, items, or abilities with each filled chalice. There is a ghost-like statue of Sir Dan in the hall, and each chalice he brings causes it to fill in just a little more and a little more. If you obtain all 20 chalices, his statue will fully materialize, and you will receive an alternate ending. Now that I've gone over some of the finer details, I'd like to briefly talk about the story of each game. So the first game, once more, MediEvil, starts off. So the kingdom of Gallowmere enjoyed peace for quite some time, and its ruler, King Peregrine, was rather fond of storytelling. Now our hero, Sir Daniel Fortescue, caught the interest of King Peregrine with his stories of slain dragons and vanquished knights, and more. He was then knighted and placed in charge of the kingdom's royal battalion, which was nothing more than an honorary title given the centuries that Gallowmere was graced with peace and tranquility. That peace, however, did not last forever. One fateful day, the evil sorcerer, Zarok, raised an army of undead with the goal of conquering and ruling over Gallowmere. Sir Fortescue's position was no longer an honorary one, and he was called upon to lead King Peregrine's army into battle. Zarok's army had archers in the front lines who launched a flurry of arrows into the battlefield during the initial charge. Within seconds, Sir Fortescue was slain with an arrow that pierced his left eye. It was even said that it was the first arrow that was fired. The army of Gallowmere was triumphant in the end, and Zarok had seemingly disappeared. The king was ashamed over the hero of Gallowmere being slain so effortlessly, and did not wish for his kingdom to also know that Zarok had gotten away. King Peregrine told his subjects that Sir Fortescue managed to slay the evil sorcerer in battle, but his life was lost shortly after as he was mortally wounded in the process. This gave hope to his people, and Sir Dan was proclaimed as a hero. A hero's tomb was erected, and even though it was believed that he had a proper place in the Hall of Heroes, he was never fully accepted by the other heroes, as his supposed deeds held no truth. 100 years passed as Zarok lied in wait. He raised yet another army of undead to try and take over Gallowmere once more. But little did he realize that his spell, this time around, also caused Sir Daniel Fortescue to return to life. This was our hero's chance to slay Zarok and earn his place in the Hall of Heroes. Now, there are a number of memorable moments throughout the game that I won't go into detail, as I hope that you are inspired to experience this adventure on your own. I will say, though, that despite what appears to be a serious overtone, there are actually moments that are still pretty lighthearted, and assuming that your soul is not devoid of joy, such as Zarok's, I dare to say that you will find humor spread throughout as well. Now, while I mentioned this impact that the series has had on me, the statement was not for show, and two of my tattoos actually happen to be from the game series. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show you at the moment because of the shirt that I'm wearing, but I may go over that in another video. So, the second title in the series, MediEvil 2, was also released on the PlayStation 1, and that was on April 21st, year 2000 in Europe, and May 9th, 2000 in North America. The gameplay remains largely untouched, but there are a few additions such as a boxing-style minigame that was for the third boss fight against Iron Slugger. Chalice of Souls can still be collected, and obtaining them all does provide an alternate ending just like in the first game. Now, my favorite addition, however, is called Danhand. Sir Fortescue just so happens to gain the ability to place his head on the zombie-like hands, reminiscent of Thing from the Addams Family, after the boss fight against Iron Slugger. Danhand allows Daniel to control the green hands and reach small places, helping him solve puzzles and even obtain treasure. This does not come without its own danger, as his head can be stolen by birds, and while controlling Danhand, Headless Dan is vulnerable to attacks from nearby enemies. It is also worth noting that Danhand cannot perform any attacks. As I'm sure you guessed, Sir Daniel Fortescue was victorious against Zarok, and he was laid to rest once more for his well-deserved eternal slumber. Or so he thought. MediEvil 2 takes place 500 years after the events of the first game. Zarok's spellbook was discovered by another sorcerer named Lord Palethorn. His great wealth is what allowed him to study the dark arts and eventually find the spellbook. Needless to say, the spell was cast, and London was soon overrun with the undead. Once the spell was cast, the pages of the spellbook were scattered throughout the city, and this caused Lord Palethorn to gain an appearance resembling that of a demon. Sir Daniel's body just so happened to be on display in a nearby museum, and he was awoken once more. His task was to find the pages scattered from the spellbook and to ultimately put a stop to Lord Palethorn and his plans. There are elements of love, time travel, and heartbreak this time around. His love interest happens to be an ancient mummy princess, and there is even a unique characterization of Jack the Ripper. Just as I stated when talking about the first game, I certainly don't want to give much more away, and I do hope that you will seek out this experience as well. MediEvil 2 did win the Best Console Game category at the 2000 BAFTA Interactive Entertainment Awards. Now, to date, the story has ended here after the second title, and there were two more entries, if you will, to follow. One was a re-release, and the other was a remaster. The re-release was called MediEvil Resurrection, and it was a launch title on the PlayStation Portable, also known as the PSP. It was released on September 1st, 2005 in Europe, and September 13th, 2005 in North America. Now, this title combined both of the MediEvil games. There were new characters, a new subplot, and even alternate narration, such as Tom Baker, the fourth incarnation of the Doctor in the cult science fiction series Doctor Who portrayed the Grim Reaper. The overall feel of the game was a little less gothic horror with the comedy, and it was a bit more lighthearted and humorous than the previous entries, the original entries. Now, other changes were not quite as accepted by players of the original series. The design of various levels and characters were drastically changed, and some levels were also actually completely removed. To their disdain, neither Chris Sorrell or Jason Wilson, co-creators of MediEvil, were involved with the development of this title. While they were disappointed with the finished product, Sorrell did state that considering the time restraints that the development team faced, they did an awesome job. In 2019, the MediEvil remake was released worldwide on October 25th on the PlayStation 4. The biggest changes were, of course, to the graphics. The music was still composed by Bob and Barn, but this time it was orchestrated by the Prague Symphony Orchestra. There were a few changes to the dialogue here and there, namely the Amazon warrior Imanzi Shangoma in the Hall of Heroes. She has lines in the original such as, "Oh, I love a man who doesn't talk back. I think if you return, I may take you for my husband. And think of me when you throw it," after she gives Dan her spear that does not appear in the remake. One interesting addition to the remake was the ability to unlock the original game, referred to as the old game option, by completing what were known as Souls challenges. And by putting all 19 of these souls to rest, you were able to unlock it, and it was emulated flawlessly within this title. Now, most levels in this version of MediEvil, released in 2019, contain a chest with a hidden chest with a lost soul for you to find. Now, at that point, Daniel is given a clue from each soul, and that tells him where each challenge can be found. Now, these challenges vary from fighting off enemies, looking for special items, racing on foot, and more. Now, aside from everything that I had just gone over, the heart and soul of the original game is still there, and not much else has really changed. Now, the 2019 remaster was only for the first entry in the series, and many have speculated as to whether a remake would be released or a remaster for the second game. But to date, there has been nothing more than gossip. So, I'd like to know, and please let me know in the comments, if you've played any or all of the titles in this game. Was there anything that you particularly enjoyed learning about with this series? Are there any games that you've played that you feel I may enjoy, and perhaps I could also create a video on those as well? Anything that you have for me is more than welcome in the comments, and I thank you for joining me in another episode, and we will get together again soon.